ಸಂಸಾರದವ ನಲಲಿಡಲೋಕ ತ್ರಣಯ ಕಾರುಣ್ಯ ಗಣ ಗಣ ತ್ವಂ ಪ್ರಾಪ್ತಸ್ಯ ಕಲ್ಯಾಣ ಗುಣರ್ನವಸ್ಯ ವಂದೇ ಗುರು ಶ್ರೀಚರಣರವಿಂದಂ महाप्रभो कीर्तन नित्य गीता वादित्य माद्यान् मनसो रसेना रोमांचकांपा सुतरंगबाजो वंदे गुरु श्रीचरणरविंदं श्रीविग्रहाराधन नित्यानाना सिंगारतान् मंदिरमजनादो युक्तस्य भक्तां च नियुञ्जतोऽपि वन्दे गुरु श्रीचरणरविन्दम् चतुर्विधा श्री भगवत्प्रसादा स्वादान्न तृप्तान् हरिभक्तसङ्गान् कृतैव तृप्तिं भजता सदैव वन्दे गुरु श्रीचरणरविन्दम् श्रीराधिका माधवयोरपारा माधुर्यलीला गुणरूपनाम्ना श्रीराधिका माधवयोरपारा माधुर्यलीला गुणरूपनाम्ना प्रतीक्षणा स्वादनलोलुपास्य वन्दे गुरु श्रीचरणरविन्दम् निकुञ्जयुनो रतिकेलिसिद्याय यायालिभियुक्तिरपेक्षणीया तत्रातिदाक्षात् अतिवल्लभास्य वन्दे गुरु श्रीचरणरविन्दम् साक्षादरित्वेन समस्तशास्त्रे उक्तस्तथा भाव्यत एव सद्भिः किन्तु प्रभोजा प्रिय एव तस्य वन्दे गुरु श्रीचरणरविन्दम् यस्य प्रसादात् भगवत्प्रसादो यस्य प्रसादान्न गति कुतोऽपि यस्य प्रसादात् भगवत्प्रसादो यस्य प्रसादान्न गति कुतोऽपि ध्यायान् सुवासं तस्य यशस्श्रीसन्ध्यं वन्दे गुरु श्रीचरणरविन्दम् नमो विष्णुपदाय कृष्णप्रेष्ठाय भूतले श्रीमते भक्तिवेदान्ता स्वामिन्निति नामिने नमस्ते सरस्वती देवे गौरवाणी प्रचारिणे निर्विशेष शून्यवादी पाश्चात्यादेशतारिणे सरस्वती देवे गौरवाणी प्रचारिणे निर्विशेष शून्यवादी पाश्चात्यादेशतारिणे जय श्री कृष्ण चैतन्य प्रभु नित्यानंद श्री अद्वैत गदाधर शिवसदि गौरा भक्तवृंद जय श्री कृष्ण चैतन्य प्रभु नित्यानंद श्री अद्वैत गदाधर शिवसदि गौरा भक्तवृंद जय श्री कृष्ण चैतन्य प्रभु नित्यानंद श्री अद्वैत गदाधर शिवसदि गौरा भक्तवृंद कृष्ण चैतन्य प्रभु नित्यानंद श्री अद्वैत गदाधर शिवसदि गौरा भक्तवृंद हरे कृष्ण 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 हरे 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 राम 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 हरे 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 कृष्ण 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 हरे 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 राम Rama Rama Hare Hare. Hare Krishna, Hare Krishna, Krishna Krishna, Hare Hare, Hare Rama, Hare Rama, Rama Rama, Hare Hare. Hare Krishna, Hare Krishna, Krishna Krishna, Hare Hare, Hare Rama, Hare Rama, Rama Rama, Hare Hare. Hare Krishna, Hare Krishna, Krishna Krishna, Hare Hare, Hare Rama, Hare Rama, Rama Rama, Hare Hare. Hare Krishna, Hare Krishna, Krishna Krishna, Hare Hare, Hare Rama, Hare Rama, Rama Rama, Hare Hare. Hare Krishna, Hare Krishna, Krishna Krishna, Hare Hare, Hare Rama, Hare Rama, Rama Rama, Hare Hare. Hare Krishna, Hare Krishna, Krishna Krishna, Hare Hare, Hare Rama, Hare Rama, Rama Rama, Hare Hare. Hare Krishna, Hare Krishna, Krishna Krishna, Hare Hare, Hare Rama, Hare Rama, Rama Rama, Hare Hare. Hare Krishna, Hare Krishna, Krishna Krishna, Hare Hare, Hare Rama, Hare Rama, Rama Rama, Hare Hare. Hare Krishna, Hare Krishna, Krishna Krishna, Hare Hare, Hare Rama, Hare Rama, Rama Rama, Hare Hare. Hare Krishna, Hare Krishna, Krishna Krishna, Hare Hare, Hare Rama, Hare Rama, Rama Rama, Hare Hare. Hare Krishna, Hare Krishna, Krishna Krishna, Hare Hare, Hare Rama, Hare Rama, Rama Rama, Hare Hare. Jaya Radha Nila Madhava Radha Nila Madhava Radhe. Jayo Jagannatha Jayo Baladeva Jayo Subhadrama Jayo Sudarshana. Jayo Sita Ram, Jayo Sita Ram, Jayo Sita Ram, Jayo Lakshmana Hanuman. Jayo Lakshmi Narasimha, Jayo Lakshmi Narasimha, Jayo Lakshmi Narasimha, Jayo Lakshmi Narasimha. Jayo Gauranitai, Jayo Gauranitai, Jayo Gauranitai, Jayo Gauranitai. Jayo Prabhupada, Jayo Prabhupada, Jayo Prabhupada, Jayo Prabhupada. Jayo Guru Deva, Jayo Guru Deva, Jayo Guru Deva, Jayo Guru Deva. Nitai Gaura Hari Bol, Hari Bol, Hari Bol, Nitai Gaura Hari Bol.
नमस्ते नरसिंहाय नमो नमः तुलसी कृष्ण प्रेयसी नमो नमः तुलसी कृष्ण प्रेयसी नमो नमः राधा कृष्ण सेवा पावो ए अभिलाषी राधा कृष्ण सेवा पावो ए अभिलाषी जे तोमार शरण लोय तार वांछा पूर्ण होय कृपा कोरी कोरो तारे वृंदावन वासी मोर ये अभिलाष विलास कुंज दियो वास नयने हेरिबो सदा युगल रूप राशि निवेदन धारो सखीरनुगत कोरो सेवाधिकार दिए कोरो निज दासी दीन कृष्ण दासे को ये न मोरा होय श्री राधा गोविंद प्रेमे सदा ये न भासी श्री राधा गोविंद प्रेमे सदा ये न भासी यानि कानि च पापानि ब्रह्महत्यादिकानि च तानि तानि प्रणश्यन्ति प्रदक्षिण पदे पदे यानि कानि च पापानि ब्रह्महत्यादिकानि च तानि तानि प्रणश्यन्ति प्रदक्षिण पदे पदे Hare Krishna, Hare Krishna, Krishna Krishna, Hare Hare, Hare Rama, Hare Rama, Rama Rama, Hare Hare. Hare Krishna, Hare Krishna, Krishna Krishna, Hare Hare, Hare Rama, Hare Rama, Rama Rama, Hare Hare. Hare Krishna, Hare Krishna, Krishna Krishna, Hare Hare, Hare Rama, Hare Rama, Rama Rama, Hare Hare. Jaya Vrinda Devi, Jaya Vrinda Devi, Vrinda Devi, Jaya Vrinda Devi. Jaya Tulsi Maharani, Jaya Tulsi Maharani, Jaya Tulsi Maharani, Jaya Tulsi Maharani. Nitai Gaura Hari Bol, Hari Bol, Hari Bol, Nitai Gaura Hari Bol. वृन्दायै तुलसीदिव्यायै प्रियायै केशवस्य च विष्णुभक्तिप्रदे देवी सत्यवत्यै नमो नमः. वृन्दायै तुलसीदिव्यायै प्रियायै केशवस्य च विष्णुभक्तिप्रदे देवी सत्यवत्यै नमो नमः. वृन्दायै तुलसीदिव्यायै प्रियायै केशवस्य च विष्णुभक्तिप्रदे देवी सत्यवत्यै नमो नमः.
Within my vision shall behold the beautiful path and Radha and Krishna. I beg you to make me follow Kara Danso's Braja. Please give me the privilege devotional service and make me your own maidservant. This very fallen lowly servant of Krishna praise. May I always swim the love Shishi Radha and Govinda Shrimati Tulsi Maharani Ki Jai. There are 10 fancies in the matter of chanting holy names that should be avoided, and they are as follows. 1. To blaspheme the devotees who have dedicated their lives for the propagation of holy name of the Lord. 2. To consider the name of the demigods like Lord Shiva, Brahma to be equal to independent name Lord Vishnu. 3. To disobey the order of the spiritual master. 4. To blaspheme the Vedic literature or literature pursuant the Vedic version. 5. To consider the glory of chanting Hare Krishna to be imagination. 6. To give some interpretation to holy name of the Lord. 7. to commit sinful activities and strength of chanting holy name. 8. To consider chanting Hare Krishna one of the auspicious ritualistic activities, offering the Vedas of fruit activities, karma, ganda. 9. To instruct a faithless person about the glory of the holy name. 10. To not complete faith in the chanting holy names, and to maintain material attachments in understanding so many instructions on this matter. It is also an offense to be inattentive while chanting. Every devotee who claims to Vaishnava must carefully guard against these 10 offenses in order to achieve desired success. Krishna Prema. Now let us offer most humble obeisances unto all the Vaishnava devotees of the Lord. They are just as trees who have fulfilled everyone, and they are full of compassion for the fallen conditioned souls. Shri Chaitanya Shastakam Ki Jai. Jeto Darpana Marjanam Bhavamaha Davagni Nirapanam Shiriya Kairava Chantrika Vitaranam Vidyavatu Jivanam Anandam Buddhivardhanam Pratipadam Purunaramita Sadhanam Sarvatmasnapanam Param Vijayate Shri Krishna Sankirtanam Nam Namakari Bahuda Nija Sarva Shaktis Tatra Pita Niyamita Smaranena Kalaha Eta Tishi Tava Kripa Bhagavam Mamapi Durudeva Mi Disham Yaha Janina Nurakaha Trinatapi Sunichena Tarorapi Sahishnuna Amanina Manatena Kirtanya Sadaharihi Na Thanam Na Chanam Na Sundarin Kavitamba Jagadisha Kamaye Mama Jammani Jamanishware Bhavata Bhaktir Haituki Tvai Ayinanda Tanuja Kinkaram Patitam Man Vishame Bhavam Buddha Kripaya Tava Pada Pankaja Stithaturi Satisham Vichintaya Nayanam Karadashrutaraya Vatanam Katkata Rudaya Gira Pulaka Nichitam Apurkata Tava Nama Krahane Bhavishati Yuga itam nimishena chakrusha pravisha itam shunya itam jagat sarvam govinda virahena me ashrishava padaratam pinnashtumam adarshana marmhatam karotuva yatha tatha va vidathatu lampato madprananathastu se eva na paraha Hare Krishna 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 Hare 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 Rama, Rama Rama, Hare Hare. Shri Chaitanya Shastakam Ki.
Glory to Sri Krishna Sankirtana, which cleanses the heart of all the dust accumulated for years and extinguishes the fire of conditional life of repeated birth and death. This Sankirtana movement is the prime benediction for humanity at large because it spreads the rays of the benediction moon. It is the life of all transcendental knowledge. It increases the ocean of transcendental bliss and enables us to fully taste the nectar for which you are always anxious. O my Lord, your holy name alone can render all benediction to living beings. And thus you have hundreds of millions of names like Krishna and Govinda. In these transcendental names you invested all your transcendental energies. There are not even hard and fast rules for chanting these names. O my Lord, out of kindness you enable us to easily approach you by your holy names. But I am so unfortunate that I have no attraction for them. One should chant the holy name of the Lord in a humble state of mind, thinking oneself lower than the straw in the street. One should be more tolerant than a tree, devoid of all sense of false prestige, and should be ready to offer all respect to others. In such a state of mind, one can chant the holy name of the Lord constantly. O Almighty Lord, I have no desire to accumulate wealth, nor do I desire beautiful women, nor do I want any number of followers. I only want your causeless devotional service birth after birth. O Son of Maharaj Nanda Krishna, I am your eternal servitor. Yet somehow or other I have fallen into the ocean of birth and death. Please pick me up from this ocean of death and place me as one of the atoms at your lotus feet. O my Lord, when will my eyes be decorated with tears of love flowing constantly when I chant your holy name? When will my voice choke up? And when will the hairs of my body stand on in the recitation of your name? O Govinda, feeling your separation, I am considering a moment to be like 12 years or more. Tears are flowing from my eyes like torrents of rain, and I am feeling all vacant in the world in your absence. I know no one but Krishna is my Lord, and he shall remain so when he handles me roughly by his embrace, or makes me broken hearted by not being present before me. He is completely free to do anything and everything, for he is always my worship Lord unconditionally.
Shri Chaitanya Shastakam Ki Jai.
Shri Guru Pranam prayers ki jai. ॐ अज्ञानतिमिरान्धस्य ज्ञानाञ्जनशलाकया चक्षुरुन्मिलितं येन तस्मै श्रीगुरवे नमः। श्रीचैतन्यमनोभीष्टं स्थापितं येन भूतले स्वयं रूपा कदा मह्यं ददाति स्वपदान्तिकं। वन्देऽहं श्रीगुरो श्रीयुतापदकमलं श्रीगुरून् वैष्णवांश्च श्रीरूपं साग्रजातं सहगणरघुनाथान्वितं तं सजीवं साद्वैतं सावधूतं परिजनसहितं कृष्णचैतन्यदेवं श्रीराधाकृष्णपादान् सहगणललिता श्रीविशाखान्वितांश्च। नमः ॐ विष्णुपादाय कृष्णप्रेष्ठाय भूतले श्रीमते भक्तिवेदान्ता स्वामिनिति नामिनि। नमस्ते सरस्वते देवी गौरवाणी प्रचारिणि निर्विशेष शून्यवादी पाश्चात्यदेशतारिणि। नमः ॐ विष्णुपादाय कृष्णप्रेष्ठाय भूतले श्रीमते भक्तिसिद्धान्त सरस्वती इति नामिनि। श्रीवर्षभानवी देवी दयतया कृपाब्धे कृष्णसम्बन्धविज्ञानदायिनी प्रभवे नमः। मधुरोज्ज्वलप्रेमाद्या श्रीरूपनुगा भक्तिदा श्रीगौरकरुणाशक्तिविग्रहाय नमोऽस्तुते। नमस्ते गौरवाणी श्रीमूर्तये दिनतारिणि रूपनुगा विरूपा सिद्धान्ताद्वन्तहारिणि। नमो गौरकिशोराय साक्षात् वैराग्यमूर्तये प्रणम्बारसम्बोधे पदम्बुजयते नमः। नमो भक्तविनोदाय सच्चिदानन्दनामिने गौरशक्तिस्वरूपाय रूपनुगावरायते गौरविर्भवभूमे स्वं निर्देशा सज्जना प्रिय वैष्णव सर्वभूमा श्रीजगन्नाथाय ते नमः। वाञ्छाकल्पतरुभ्यश्च कृपासिन्धुभ्यैव च पतितानां पावनेभ्यो वैष्णवेभ्यो नमो नमः। नमो महावदन्याय कृष्णप्रेमप्रदायिते कृष्णाय कृष्णचैतन्यनाम्ने गौरे त्विषे नमः। पञ्चतत्त्वकं कृष्णं भक्तरूपस्वरूपकं भक्तावतारं भक्ताख्यं नमामि भक्तशक्तिकं। हे कृष्ण करुणा सिन्धु दीनबन्धो जगत्पते गोपेश गोपिका कान्ता राधाकान्ता नमोऽस्तुते। जयतं सुरतोपङ्गोर्मम मन्दमतेर्गति मत्सर्वस्वपदं भोज मदनमोहन दिव्याद्वृन्दारण्य कल्पाद्रुमदा श्रीमद्रत्नागरासिंहासनस्थौ श्रीमद्राधा श्रीलगोविन्ददेवो प्रेस्ताल्बि सेव्यमानौ स्वरामि। श्रीमन् रसरसरं बीवं सीवततस्थितः कर्षन् वेणुस्वनेर्गोपीर्गोपीर्नादाश्रियेस्तु नः। तप्तकाञ्चन गौराङ्गी राधे वृन्दावनेश्वरी वृषभानुसुते देवी प्रणमामि हरिप्रिये। जय श्रीकृष्ण चैतन्य प्रभु नित्यानन्द श्री अद्वैत गदाधर श्रीवासादि गौरभक्तवृन्द। हरे कृष्णा कृष्ण कृष्ण हरे 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 राम 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 हरे हरे।
Shri Brahma Samhita ki jai. Ishvara Parama Krishna Satchitananda Vigraha Anadiradi Govinda Sarvakarana Karanam Chintamani Prakara Sadmasakalpa Vriksha Laksha Vritesa Suravira Vipaliyantam Lakshmi Sahasra Satasambrahma Sevyamanam Govindam Adipurisham Tamaham Bhajami Alok Venun Kanantam Aravendam Taksham Parhavatam Samasitam Buddha Sundarangam Kandarpakotikam Aniya Visesha Sobham Govindam Adipurisham Tamaham Bhajami Alola Chandrakala Sadvanamalya Vamsi Ratnam Gadam Pranayakeli Kalavilasam Shamam Chibangalam Tanyita Prakasam Govindam Adipurisham Tamaham Bhajami Angani Yasya Sakalendriya Vittimanti Pasyanti Pantika Yanti Chiran Jaganti Ananda Chinmaya Sadujvala Vigrahasya Govindam Adipurisham Tamaham Bhajami Advaitam Achyutam Anadim Anantarupam Adyam Purana Purusham Navayoganam Cha Vedesa Durlabam Adurlabam Atma Bhakto Govindam Adipurisham Tamaham Bhajami Pantastu Koti Satavatsara Sampragam Yo Vayoratapi Manasobuni Bhurkamanam Sobhyastiyat Prapadasim Yavichinti Tatve Govindam Adipurisham Tamaham Bhajami Ekopya Sora Chaitam Jagadanda Kotim Yaschaktirasti Jagadanda Chaya Yadanta Adantarasta Paramanu Chayantarastam Govindam Adipurisham Tamaham Bhajami Yad Bhava Bhavita Dio Marajasta Daiva Samprapya Rupa Mahima Sanayana Bhusa Suktarya Meva Nikama Pratitaistuvanti Govindam Adipurisham Tamaham Bhajami Ananda Chinmaya Rasa Pratibhavita Bhista Virya Eva Nijarupataya Kalavi Goloka eva nivasata kilatma bhutto govinda madi purisham tamaham bhajami. Premanjana charita bhakti vilochanena santak sadeva desu vilokanti. Yam shama sundaram achintya gunaswarupam govinda madi purisham tamaham bhajami. Ramadi murti sukalani menatistana navataram akarod bhuvane sakintu. Krishna swayam samabhavat paramam pumam yo govinda madi purisham tamaham bhajami. Jai. Krishna. Who is? Go ahead. No, let's go
Govinda
ahead.
is the
Yes.
supreme Godhead.
Go ahead.
He has
Yes.
an eternal blissful spiritual body. He is the origin of all. He has no other origin. And he is the prime cause of all causes. I worship Govinda, the primeval Lord, the first progenitor, who is tending the cows, yielding all desire, in abodes built with spiritual gems, surrounded by millions of purpose trees, always served with great reverence and affection by hundreds of thousands of Lakshmis or Gopis. I worship Govinda, the primeval Lord, who is adept in playing on his flute, with blooming eyes like lotus petals, with head decked with peacock's feather, with a figure of beauty tinged with hue of blue clouds, and his unique loveliness charming millions of cupids. I worship Govinda, the primeval Lord, round whose neck is swinging a garland of flowers beautified with the moon locket, whose two hands are adorned with a flute and jeweled ornaments, who always revels in pastimes of love, whose graceful threefold bending form of Shyamasundara is eternally manifest. I worship Govinda, the primeval Lord, whose transcendental form is full of bliss, truth, substantiality, and is thus full of the most dazzling splendor. Each of the limbs of the transcendental figure possesses in himself the full-fledged functions of all the organs and eternally sees, maintains, and manifests the infinite universes, both spiritual and mundane. I worship Govinda, the primeval Lord, who is inaccessible to the Vedas but obtainable by pure unalloyed devotion of the soul, who is without a second, who is not subject to decay, is without a beginning, whose form is endless, who is the beginning and the eternal Purusha, yet he is a person possessing the beauty of blooming youth. I worship Govinda, the primeval Lord, only the tip of the toe of whose lotus feet is approached by the yogis who aspire after the transcendental and betake themselves to pranayama by drilling the respiration, or by the jnanis who try to find out the non-differentiated Brahman by the process of elimination of the mundane, extending over thousands of millions of years. He is an undifferentiated entity, as there is no distinction between potency and the possessor thereof. In his work of creation of millions of worlds, his potency remains inseparable. All the universes exist in him, and he is present in his fullness in every one of the atoms that are scattered throughout the universe at one and at the same time. Such is the primal Lord whom I adore. I adore the same Govinda, the primal Lord, in whose praise men who are imbued with devotion sing the mantra suktas told by the Vedas by gaining their appropriate beauty, greatness, thrones, conveyances, and ornaments. I worship Govinda, the primeval Lord, residing in his own realm Goloka with Radha, resembling his own spiritual figure, the embodiment of the ecstatic potency possessed of the 64 artistic activities, in the company of her confidants, Sakis, embodiments of the extensions of her bodily form, permeated and vitalized by his ever blissful spiritual rasa. I worship Govinda, the primeval Lord, who is Shamasundara, Krishna himself with inconceivable, innumerable attributes, whom the pure devotees see in their heart of hearts, with the eye of devotion tinged with salve of love. I worship Govinda, the primeval Lord, who manifested himself personally as Krishna and the different avatars in the world in the forms of Rama, Nrisimha, Vamana, etc., as his subjective portions.
Thank you very much. Shrimad Bhagavatam Grantaraj Ki Jai. Om Namo Bhagavate Vasudevaya. Nama Om Vishnupadaya Krishna Prasthaya Bhutale Srimate Bhakti Vedanta Swamiti Namane Namaste Saraswati Deve Guruvani Pacharine Nirvisesa Sunyavadi Bhaskati Desatari Jai Shri Krishna Chaitanya Prabhu Nityananda Shri Advaita Gadadhar Shivasati Gaur Bhaktivinoda Hare Krishna 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 Hare 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 Rama 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 Hare Hare Srila Prabhupada Ki Jai Srimad Bhagavatam Ki Jai. So we're continuing today Srimad Bhagavatam Canto 3 Chapter 9 Verse number 11. You want to read?
Hare Krishna. Translation. O my Lord, your devotees can see you through the ears by the process of bona fide hearing, and thus that hearts become cleansed and you take your seat there. You are so merciful to your devotees that you manifest yourself in the particular eternal form of transcendence in which they always think of you.
So, seeing by your ears or through the ears is much more significant than seeing through the eyes. So, this is our process in Krishna consciousness, seeing through the ears. And by the process of bona fide hearing, that means you're really paying attention when you're hearing, and you ask questions, and you hear the answers very, let's say, carefully. So this hearing process, Shravanam, Kirtanam, Vishnu, Smaranam. So if you hear and you repeat, then you remember. Hear, repeat, remember. Okay, go ahead.
Purport. The statement here that the Lord manifests himself before the devotee in the form in which the devotee likes to worship him indicates that the Lord becomes subordinate to the desires subordinate to the desire of the devotee, so much so that he manifests his particular form as the devotee demands. This demand of the devotee is satisfied by the Lord because he is pliable in terms of the transcendental loving service of the devotee. This is also confirmed in Bhagavad Gita 4.11.
Yeyatamam prapadyante tamstadaiva prajamyaham mamavart manavartante manushyapartha sarvasa.
We should note, however, that the Lord is never the order supplier of the devotee.
Yes, so that verse says, as they surrender unto me, I reveal myself to them. In other words, there's this, what you would call proportional response. The more we surrender to the Lord, the more the Lord reveals himself. The less we surrender to the Lord, the less the Lord reveals himself to us. So it all depends on how much we surrender to the Lord. Go ahead. That will determine what we see or what we don't see. Go ahead.
Here in this verse, it is particularly mentioned Tvam Bhakta Bhakti Yoga Paribhavata Bhavita. This indicates the efficiency achieved through execution of matured devotional service or prema, love of Godhead. This state of prema is achieved by the gradual process of development from faith to love. On faith, one associates with bona fide devotees, and by such association one can become engaged in bona fide devotional service, which includes proper initiation and execution of primary devotional duties prescribed in the revealed scriptures. This is clearly indicated herein by the word Shrukteshita. The Shrukteshita path is to hear from bona fide devotees who are conversant with Vedic wisdom, free from mundane sentiment. By this bona fide hearing process, the neophyte devotee becomes cleansed of all material rubbish, and thus he becomes attached to one of the many transcendental forms of the Lord, as described in the Vedas.
Okay, so let's stop it right there for a second. When it says, the devotee becomes cleansed of all material rubbish, and thus he becomes attached to one of the many transcendental forms of the Lord, as described in the Vedas. So, I'm going to give you an example of what is by this bona fide hearing process, the neophyte devotee becomes cleansed of all material rubbish. So this is one example of material rubbish. Let's look up on the internet object of knowledge. Object of knowledge. What's it say?
It says the object of knowledge involves the consciousness of the distinction between the idea of an object and the object that warrants.
That warrants
That warrants.
the idea. What do you understand? The consciousness of the distinction between the idea of an object and the object that warrants the idea.
So one is the conceptual and the other one is the real, but both. So one is the idea of the object, means it's like this is the, let's say this is the definition of the Lord, and then the actual object is the Lord. The definition of the Lord and the Lord.
Well, they don't mention the Lord anywhere here.
Yeah, but I'm saying in this case they are
Talking
giving.
Material rubbish. Now, let's hear what Prabhupada has to say about object of knowledge. And the object of knowledge is called Geyam, J-N-E-Y-A-M. And Geyam refers to the Purusha, or the real enjoyer, and that's Krishna. Therefore, Krishna is the object of knowledge. So there's three things: Geyam, Jnanam, and Gyata. So Geyam is the object of knowledge. That's the real Purusha, and that's Krishna. And then Jnanam is the process of acquiring knowledge, and Gyata is the one who is trying to learn. Shiva is the one who's trying to learn. The object of knowledge is Krishna, and the process of knowledge is jnana. That makes sense, doesn't it? So, when they say that the object of knowledge involves the consciousness of the distinction between the idea of an object and the object that warrants the idea. Well, most people have made a gigantic mistake by thinking that the Purusha is the Jiva. And therefore, they get completely misled as far as what is the purpose of life. So, although you might say, okay, so there's an idea of an object, and then there's the characteristics of the object that warrants the idea. All right, that's some kind of a definition, but actually, it's rubbish, because the real idea of any object is Paramatma, who's present in the heart of every living entity, and is present in every atom of the universe. So if you say the idea of an object and the object that warrants the idea, you're only dealing with matter. You're not dealing with spirit. Therefore, it's totally misleading. This is called rubbish, or as Prabhupada says here, says, by the bona fide hearing process, the neophyte devotee becomes cleansed of all material rubbish, and thus he becomes attached to one of the many transcendental forms of the Lord as described in the Vedas. So those transcendental forms of the Lord, they are all eternal, and they are the real, and the Lord is the real Purusha. So he's the real object of knowledge. You see how everything in the speculative world focuses on matter. There's no focus at all on the soul or super soul. And that's why people are misled. So here's a definition, and it sounds right, but actually it's misleading. It's rubbish, because it takes you away from Krishna. Do you understand that? It's very important that we understand this. The real object of all knowledge is Krishna. Okay, go ahead.
This attachment of the devotee to a particular form of the Lord is due to natural inclination. Each and every living entity is originally attached to a particular type of transcendental service because he is eternally the servitor of the Lord. The Lord Chaitanya says that the living entity is eternally a servitor of the Supreme Personality of Godhead, Sri Krishna. Therefore, every living entity has a particular type of service relationship with the Lord eternally.
So you see, here we see again, the real object of knowledge is Krishna, and the real identity living entity, that he's the eternal servant of the Lord. You don't get any of that through the material rubbish, you see, that they teach in schools, and they teach just like this definition they're giving of the object of knowledge. This is very important to understand. Otherwise, we're going to be misled throughout our whole life. The kids are already misled. They're being taught all this nonsense. But we shouldn't be misled, and we should help, especially our own children, not to be misled. Okay, go ahead.
This particular attachment is invoked by practice of regulative devotional service to the Lord.
Invoked means awakened. Right?
And thus, the devotee becomes attached to the eternal form of the Lord, exactly like one who is already eternally attached. This attachment for a particular form of the Lord is called Swarupa Siddhi.
That's the perfection of your, let's say, consciousness. Swarupa means the form, but it's the perfection of your position as the eternal devotee of the Lord. Go ahead.
The Lord sits on the lotus heart of the devotee in the eternal form the pure devotee desires. And thus the Lord does not part from the devotee, as confirmed in the previous verse. The Lord, however, does not disclose himself to a casual or unauthentic worshipper to be exploited. This is confirmed in Bhagavad Gita.
See, in other words, he holds back the possibility of a pseudo so-called devotee exploiting him for their sense gratification. In other words, one must be pure in their hearing and acting and thinking so that Krishna can reveal himself. He will not reveal himself. He has a prerogative not to reveal himself to people who are not sincere. They might be doing some things, but they're not really sincere because they're still mixed with material desires and things. Go ahead.
This is confirmed in Bhagavad Gita 7.25.
Naham prakasasarvasya yogamaya samanvritaha mudoyam nabijananti lokomamacham avyayam.
Rather, rather by yoga maya, the Lord remains concealed
That means hidden.
to the non-devotees or casual devotees who are serving their sense gratification.
So you see there's two categories here, the non-devotees and the casual devotees. Today I'll go to Mangala Aarti. Oh, tomorrow I'm not going to go because I don't feel like it. See? So that's a casual devotee. Go ahead.
The Lord is never visible to the pseudo devotees.
And now that's the third. Pseudo devotee means a false devotee. So you have non-devotee, casual devotee, and false devotees.
Who worship the demigods in charge of universal affairs. The conclusion is that the Lord cannot become the order supplier of a pseudo devotee, but he is always prepared to respond to the desires of a pure, unconditional devotee who is free from all tinges of material infection. Tinges of material infection.
Material infection is everything is mixed. Mishra, right? Does that mean mixed in Hindi? Yeah. So you mix devotional service with sense gratification. Just like someone says, let's go out on Sankirtan. And then the next week they say, well, I can't come out on Sankirtan. I'm taking my kids to Disneyland. So that's mixed. That's Mishra, right? You're mixing sense gratification with Krishna consciousness. Oh no, we'll do Harinam Sankirtan at Disneyland. Yeah, big chance you'll do that. Yeah. Okay. Yeah. So one has to be free from all tinges of material infection. Now that's so profound. You see, these purports in this third canto, ninth chapter, are extremely profound. Prabhupada's going into deep detail about what is pure devotional service. It's just wonderful to hear this. Only Prabhupada could write like this. Nobody else can write like that I know. Of course, there's Bhakti Siddhanta Saraswati Thakur and Acharyas, but Prabhupada's writing here is extremely, extremely profound. He's not missing any fundamental point, and he's taking his time and giving these purports to these verses. The verses themselves are extremely profound, and he's giving even more information in the purport. Okay, so there's another thing that we want to hear. Yeah, go ahead.
So here, the attachment for a particular form of the Lord is called the Swarupa Siddhi. So is that based on who we worship, say Radhanira Madhav we worship, and then we get attached, or is it like something that gets revealed?
Yeah, I'll give you a practical example. There's Bhisma Pitamaha. He was attached to the forearm form of Parthasarathi. So that's what he wanted to see at the moment of death. Now he knows all about Krishna's two-arm form, but he was particularly interested in the four-arm form of the Lord, as Narayana. And that was his preference. And it's nothing wrong with that. Right? And then Krishna will satisfy the desire of the devotee. Now, this is not a material desire to worship the Lord in a particular form that one is attracted to. It's not like pandering to the mundane desires of a living entity. This is a transcendental reciprocation due to the choice or the tendency of the devotee to worship this particular form of the Lord. It could be Vamanadev, it can be, in the case, Parthasarati, etc. Right. Now, that just shows the intimate relationship between the devotee and Krishna. When one becomes a pure devotee, that intimate relationship takes place. And then the Lord reciprocates with the desire of the devotee to be worshipped in a particular form that the devotee is attached to. Go ahead.
So, Hare Krishna Maharaj, I think this verse really clarifies. A lot of times I interact with some Sri Vaishnava, they used to give supporting that, okay, why Narayana is, I mean, if they compare why they pray Narayana, because they said, okay, like you gave the example of Bhishmadeva, he desires the four-arm form. Similarly, like Devaki, they said, okay, why they didn't come in the two-arm form? Why they came in? Why he came in four-arm form? So Narayana is the supreme personality or something. So, but here it is clearly mentioned now that as the devotee desires, he reveal his that form, right? So
Yeah, but pure devotee.
pure devotee, yeah.
Right.
So, Maharaj, apart from that, so other devotees also desire some different forms apart from like normal, like Narsimha or the different forms. Like for example, Tukaram, so he formed like Vitthal or some other forms, let's say in other state, maybe they have pure devotees or saints, they desire different forms and they, so is that also include form?
Yeah, yes.
Okay.
They're all either Vishnu forms or either four-arm forms or two-arm forms. Yeah. And you have also there's a specific form of the Lord also that's a combination of Lord Chaitanya, Krishna, and one other. This was revealed to Sarvabhauma Bhattacharya by Lord Chaitanya. So yeah, you have Lord Chaitanya, you have Krishna, and there's one more I forget. Anyway, I'll think about it. So yeah, there are many different transcendental forms of the Lord, right? Because the Lord has infinite expansions.
So here again it mentioned that it depends upon how you are attracted to eternally, means let's say
Yeah, it was
based on
Rama, Chaitanya, and Krishna. So Sarvabhauma Bhattacharya saw this incredible form of the Lord, and this combination of these three forms of the Lord, and totally surrendered to the Lord when he saw that. Go ahead.
that's why I think also like how you eternally attach to that particular form from your previous things, or like if I seen some devotees are really on focus, not focus, but they like to worship Rama or some Krishna or somebody else, maybe Narsimha. So that attraction is natural. That's what he says, right, in this verse.
It's a what you would call a predilection or a tap done of Kunti Devi or whatever. So the baby form is very particular to them. So that's okay. It's just like people worship the baby form of Krishna, especially in North India. So that's their preference. Now, as long as they have pure desires, Krishna reciprocates because they're attached to that particular form of the Lord. The Lord has so many forms, right? So, and then Bhismadev had his choice of wanting to see Parthasarathi and so forth. So these are all what you would call intimate relationship between the devotee and Krishna. Okay? So then there's another point we want to make. So anyway, as you see, we saw that definition of object of knowledge that's given in the dictionary and the real object of knowledge. So the definition in the dictionary is focused only on matter or prakriti. There's nothing spiritual about it. So read that definition again. What was it? It's to understand the distinction between the idea of something.
Idea of an object and the object that warrants the idea.
Right. So this is what they teach in school. But the real object of knowledge is to understand Krishna, who is the Paramatma. He's present in the heart of every living entity and in every atom of the universe. So he is the real object of knowledge. It's not the temporary qualities that warrant the idea of something. Like, length, breadth, width, weight, color, taste, etc. So we see this rubbish knowledge is in the dictionary, and the real knowledge is in Bhagavad Gita. So Gyayam is the object of knowledge, and it refers to the Purusha or Krishna. He is the real object of all knowledge. And Jnanam is the process of acquiring the knowledge, and Gyata, or the living entity, or jiva, is the one trying to learn the knowledge. So you have these three things. You have Gyayam, and Jnanam, and Gyata. Okay? So this is the difference between rubbish, as he said, what does he call it? He calls it material rubbish. Now it says here, by this bona fide hearing process, the neophyte devotee becomes cleansed of all material rubbish, and thus he becomes attached to one of the many transcendental forms of the Lord as described in the Vedas. So if you just follow the dictionary definition of object of knowledge, you're going to be misled. But if you hear from Bhagavad Gita, you won't be misled. You see how easy it is to be misled today, and how many different definitions in the dictionary are actually wrong or misleading. Okay, now another thing I wanted to discuss related to this verse is Srimad Bhagavatam, first canto, 8th chapter, 18th verse, 1:8:18. And it's a verse by Kunti Devi. Namaste Purusham Tvadyam Ishwaram Pakrite Param Alakshyam Sarvabhutanam Antarbhahi Avastitam. Shrimati Kunti Devi, Kunti said, O Krishna, I offer my obeisances unto you because you are the original personality and are unaffected by the qualities of the material world. You are existing both within and without everything. yet you are invisible to all. Now, Kunti Devi, of course, a very profound devotee, right? So let's read that purport. You see it? 1:8:18.
Purport by His Divine Grace A.C. Bhaktivedanta Swami Srila Prabhupada. Srimati Kunti Devi was quite aware that Krishna is the original personality of Godhead, although he was playing the part of her nephew.
Her nephew.
Yeah, her nephew. Such an enlightened lady could not commit a mistake by offering obeisances unto her nephew. Therefore, she addressed him as the original Purusha beyond the material cosmos. Although all living entities are also transcendental, they are neither original nor infallible. The living entities are apt to fall down under the clutches of material nature, but the Lord is never like that. In the Vedas, therefore, he is described as the chief among all the living entities, Nityo Nityanam Chetanas Chetananam. Then again, he is addressed as Ishvara, or the controller. The living entities are the demigods like Chandra and Surya, are also to some extent Ishvara, but none of them is the supreme Ishvara, or the ultimate controller. He is the Parameshvara, or the super soul. He is both within and without. Although he was present before Srimati Kunti as her nephew, he was also within her and everyone else. In the Bhagavad Gita, the Lord says, I am situated in everyone's heart, and only due to me one remembers, forgets, and is cognizant, as per the Bhagavad Gita 15:15. Though through all the Vedas I am to be known, because I am the compiler of the Vedas and I am the teacher of the Vedanta. Queen Kunti affirms that the Lord, although both within and without all living beings, is still invisible. The Lord is, so to speak, a puzzle for the common man. Queen Kunti experienced personally that Lord Krishna was present before her, yet he entered within the womb of Uttara to save her embryo from the attack of Ashwadhama's Brahmastra. Kunti herself was puzzled about whether Sri Krishna is all-pervasive or localized. In fact, he is both, but he reserves the right of not being exposed to persons who are not surrendered souls.
There it is. He reserves the right of not being revealed to persons who are not surrendered souls.
This checking curtain is called Maya, energy of the Supreme Lord, and it controls the limited vision of the rebellious soul. It is explained as follows.
So, we want to be free of that Maya, right? And the only way is through devotional service and this regular hearing. You see by hearing, you don't see by seeing. That's what the verse says today. Oh my Lord, your devotees can see you through the ears by the process of bona fide hearing. No, in other words, when you're hearing news, that's not bona fide hearing. When you're hearing about Krishna, that's bona fide hearing. Right? And thus their hearts become cleansed, and you take your seat there. You are so merciful to your devotees that you manifest yourself in a particular eternal form of transcendence in which they always think of you. These are amazing verses. We're receiving first-class information here that is very rare to encounter. Do you hear any first-class information in the schools? Zero. It's all basically gobbledygook nonsense. Just like that definition we just read, about the object of knowledge. Okay, so there's a lot more I want to say, but I'll save it for tomorrow. Are there any questions? See, what are we doing every day? Every day, we're trying to go deeper and deeper into understanding who Krishna is, so that we do not get misled by speculators. And once we get fixed in this knowledge of Krishna, then we see the value of regular hearing and chanting, Shravanam Kirtanam, Vishnu, about Krishna. Right? We don't need to hear about anything else, because that's going to be misleading most of the time. But there has to be some comparison, so we hear what's in the dictionary, and then we hear what's in Bhagavad Gita, and we compare them, and we see which is the truth and which is misleading.
So, Maharaj, in this verse, we discussed that every living entity, by eternally, they have some attachment or inclinations towards different forms. But there are people like, they still very much attracted to the demigods or other things, right? So, is it also applicable to them also that they have attachment from previous, and
They have what?
they also have some inclination from like their previous births, or eternally with the only worshipping, let's say, any devita or any demigods?
Well, okay, that's answered in the 7th chapter, verse number. Kamaistaista hitagyana prapadyante nya devata tam tam niyatam astaya pakritya niyataksvaya. Those whose intelligence has been stolen by material desires surrender unto demigods and follow the particular rules and regulations of worship according to their own natures. So their intelligence has been stolen by material desires. That's the description of the demigod worship. Their intelligence is stolen by material desires. It's a pretty heavy statement. Yeah. So, those who are freed from all material contaminations surrender unto the Supreme Lord and engage in His devotional service. As long as the material contamination is not completely washed off, they are by nature non-devotees. But even those who have material desires and who resort to the Supreme Lord are not so much attracted by external nature because of approaching the right goal. They soon become free from all material lust. In the Srimad Bhagavatam, it is recommended that whether one is a pure devotee and is free from all material desires, or is full of material desires, or desires liberation from material contamination, he should in all cases surrender to Vasudeva, meaning Krishna, and worship him. As stated in Bhagavatam 2.3.13, akama sarvakamo va, mokshakama udaradehi, tivrena bhakti yogena yachata purusham param. Less intelligent people who have lost their spiritual sense take shelter of demigods for immediate fulfillment of material desires, generally. Such people do not go to the Supreme Personality of Godhead because they are in the lower modes of nature, ignorance and passion, and therefore worship various demigods. Following the rules and regulations of worship, they are satisfied. The worshippers of demigods are motivated by small desires and do not know how to reach the supreme goal. But a devotee of the Supreme Lord is not misguided, because in Vedic literature there are recommendations for worshipping different gods for different purposes. That is, a diseased man is recommended to worship the sun. Those who are not devotees of the Lord think that for certain purposes demigods are better than the Supreme Lord. But a pure devotee knows that the Supreme Lord Krishna is the master of all. In the Chaitanya Charitamrita, Adi Lila, it is said, Ekale Ishwara Krishna Arasava Britya. Only the Supreme Personality of Godhead Krishna is master, and all others are servants. Therefore, a pure devotee never goes to demigods for satisfaction of his material needs. He depends on the Supreme Lord, and the pure devotee is satisfied with whatever he, meaning Krishna, gives. So, this is why we don't specifically worship the demigods. Because the demigods are the servants of Krishna. So if we please Krishna, they're going to be pleased. But if we go to them and avoid Krishna to get material benefits, then we are acting in total ignorance. So this verse settles that. There's no doubt about it. Yeah. Now, if we go to a demigod to help us surrender to Krishna, that's not a bad thing. Huh? That's bona fide, yeah. But if we go to the demigod to get material benefits, that's not bona fide. So then the gopis, they went to Katyayani, a form of Durga Mata, to have Krishna as their husband. That's bona fide. Because the demigods can act like a guru, or they can act as a misleader. So if you approach the demigod like a guru to help you come closer to Krishna, he'll help you. And if you approach him for material benefits, he'll mislead you. But the best thing is just to worship Krishna. And the demigods are going to be pleased, and Krishna will order them to, hey, help my devotee. Okay, so any other questions?
In fact, the 723, Krishna clearly says men of small intelligence worship Devada.
Yes.
There's no ambiguity.
No ambiguity. Hari Bol. Yes.
Hare Krishna Maharaj.
Yes.
Maharaj, today's verse is talking about casual devotee and unconditional devotee, and you have also explained about casual devotee. So my question is how to bring ourselves above casual devotee and become
Come regularly to class
and become more unconditional.
and listen to the lecture and then ask questions. That's the way. Shravanam, Kirtanam, Vishnu, Smaranam. This is what we're meant to do every day. The sages in Naimisharanya, for 1,000 years, they heard Srimad Bhagavatam. 1,000 years, they heard Srimad Bhagavatam spoken by Sukadeva Goswami. Huh? Well, the Sukadeva Goswami, the Sutta Goswami, yeah. Sukadeva Goswami spoke originally, and then Sutta Goswami repeated it, yeah. So, for 1,000 years, that's a long time, right? So, we got a long way to go. Huh? Oh, you can have 1,000 years if you're serious. Haribol, thank you very much. All glories to Srila Prabhupada. Now we know what the object